Appreciate the invitation. I actually was here last year, but by name last year was Claudia Garcia. Claudia, a member of our organization, was due to speak and got sick at the last minute. So I'm happy to be asked back in my own accord. So I've got to find the clickers here. I think the first thing we need to do before we talk about measuring sustainability is make sure that the definition of sustainability is understood. I've been to many sustainability talks over the last 5 or 6 years, and quite a number of leaders in the area, members of very high visibility organizations, actually stand at the podium and say they can't stand the word sustainability, and they wish it would be something other word, and they wish that it would actually go away, it's overused, and so on. I don't think it's going to go away. The movement of sustainability actually can trace back to the 1940s, and probably one landmark is 1964, I believe, with the publish of Silent Spring by Rachel Carson. So it's been around for a long time. Those of you who are the same age as I, which is I'm a boomer, remember ideas such as zero population growth and Earth Day, which was founded when I was a senior in high school. It's been around for a long time. It's not a fad. It's not going to go away. So we'll start with definition here first and talk about what it's not. And this here is the result, the summary result of the Dairy Innovation Center's life cycle assessment for fluid milk in the United States. This is a study that's referred to quite often. It has a lot of great information in it. However, it's not a measure of sustainability per se, as many people might think it would be. Neither are facts like this, which has come out of the Elanco Enough story. We decided that not only was per capita consumption important, but so was per capita production, a term we don't hear very often, if at all. And one thing we found when we started looking at per capita production, which is simply global production divided by global population, is there's actually 14% less milk produced per person today than there was in 1961. So if we start looking at food security, statistics like this are pretty scary. And I am a statistician by training, and while I did ask a question earlier, a lot of those statistics are extremely important and telling, and there's some other ones we need to look at as well. Neither of these, though, are measures of sustainability. They may indicate. So the first thing is, do consumers really care about sustainability? And I think if you look at this Nielsen survey, you'll find that this is from around the world, that 67% prefer to work for socially responsible companies. 55% will pay for products from companies that are committed to positive environmental impact. 52% made at least one purchase in the last 6 months from a socially responsible company. 52% check packaging to ensure sustainable impact. And 49% volunteer and/or donate to organizations engaged in social and environmental programs. So do consumers care? I think information like this says that they do, and virtually every study I've seen quoted shows that they do. But what is sustainability? And if you talk about cultural leaders, I hope most people recognize this. If you're a millennial, you may not. This is an iconic story from Fiddler on the Roof, a story about tradition versus change, and how do you maintain your traditions in a world of change, and that's where a lot of the cultural leaders' focus goes. The activist office posts pictures like these, which make many of us very upset. And then we have the iconic images of what the idealistic image of sustainability is, the red barn, families in a lush field, or something like a green cow. And then there's industry, and this is where I want to talk about the transition of sustainability. If you're under 30 in this, if you're under 40 in this picture, there may be items in this picture you don't recognize. All of us that sell products have to keep in mind what the demand for our product is. These are all products that are no longer manufactured. They're no longer needed. The world has moved on. So sustainability is very transitory. And so when we start thinking about the measures of sustainability, we have to keep that in mind, is what was sustainable 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 50 years ago, doesn't necessarily mean it's sustainable today, and all of these products are indicative of what that is. Charles Darwin is often quoted as saying survival of the fittest, but what he actually says is not the strongest of the species that survive, nor the most intelligent, but the ones most responsive to change. So I want to really put that into your minds, is when we talk about sustainability, we will probably never arrive at sustainability. It's something we strive towards, and it's about continuous improvement, and that's what we should be looking for. And so there's a cycle here, and I won't spend a lot of time on all these, but this is from Dr. Marty Matlock at the University of Arkansas, and you see here how we need to focus on sustainability as a constantly evolving topic that will ensure employability for many of us well into the future. Dr. Matlock has said sustainability is not complex, it's just hard, and that's because it's not a monometric concept. That word monometric, one of the things we often look for is where's that single most important index that we can put on a product or talk about that says we're sustainable. One of the issues with sustainability is it's easy to identify what's not sustainable. It's not so easy to identify what is sustainable, and I'll talk about that a little more in a minute. So you ask a typical farmer, and a farmer is where the root of most all of our food comes from, and I've done this quite often. This is kind of a consensus quote from what I get back from farmers, regardless of whether they're dairy farmers or row crop farmers. It's to still be farming in 10 or 20 years and to be able to pass a workable farm on to my children and their children. And you know, in actuality, that's a pretty good definition of sustainability. The definition has been formalized, though, and if we refer back to where most sustainability emanates from, it's from this statement here from the UN Brundtland Commission from 1987. So again, this is not something new. I would point out that agriculture, specifically animal agriculture, has come late to the table with regards to sustainability, not with respect to environmental issues. That's been on the table for a long, long time. But the topic of sustainability, we came late, and the wake-up call was in 2006 when FAO published Livestock's Long Shadow. And the ruminants, the cattle, took the hardest hit because they're methane emitters. And so that got us all organized around environment, which much of agriculture was already organized around anyway. And sustainability had a bad taste in its mouth because agriculture felt like it was being targeted as not being sustainable when very many knew that for centuries that they have been doing, and they have been the conservators of land and so on. But we in agriculture started getting very defensive, publishing a lot of things, and it was all focused around the environment. The thing about sustainability is it's actually got three pillars, and this is pretty much agreed upon: the social pillar, the environmental pillar, and the economic pillar. And what this requires is sound science. It requires shared values, which is a topic in and of itself that we could talk about, especially when you start thinking around cultures. When the term global got put in front of my title, I realized how, while I was trying to be sensitive to the world cultures, how U.S.-centric I truly am. We need to expand our view of the world to be more globally centric as opposed to U.S.-centric. And that's where those shared values really come into play. Both speakers beforehand also addressed the issue of shared value without even talking about it. And again, continuous improvement is where we're at. It includes food and nutritional security. That's often the first thing consumers think about when they hear the word sustainability is food. It's about efficiency and it's about balance. and it's the balance between these three pillars. We are being scored, by the way. We've been scored for the last 12 to 15 years. There are at least two reports out there. One is the Carbon Disclosure Project, the other one the Global Reporting Initiative, in which corporations report on their sustainability efforts. As you can see, these were started 2008 and 1999. And unknown to many people, organizations like Bloomberg use these reports when they post their assessments of companies as to whether as investment risk and so on. If we look at and focus on the graph on the left, please, the one on the right's been normalized by economists, and I don't understand all that economic jargon, but I do understand the one on the right. The one on the right shows if you invested $1 in a company that appears on the Dow Jones Sustainable Index today, if you invested $1 in 1997, today that dollar, which is the red line, would be worth about, on the average, of $23. If it was another company not in the Dow Jones Sustainable Index, it would be worth about $15. So there is an ROI for companies to pay attention to sustainability. That's one of the first questions that get asked by a CEO is, where's the ROI? There's the ROI right there. If we look at adoption, using the Global Reporting Index, and I'm sorry I don't know what the scale is on the y-axis, but if you look at the left side as being those that have the highest percentage of companies engaged in sustainability practices, those are on the left, and you'll see that food and beverages, the green bar that I highlighted, is just fourth from the left, fourth highest. If you look at agriculture, it's way over on the right. A true science-based indication that agriculture is late to the game, at least in a formalized sense. And yet agriculture is the one that provides the raw product to the food and retailers. And that's why we're being pushed by the food and retailers and agriculture, is to catch up. So if we go back to our three pillars of socially responsible, environmentally sound, and economically viable, it's the intersection and the balance where sustainability occurs. And the thing that makes it hard is that anybody can call foul. If it's not economically viable, and I use that word viable intentionally because we often talk about profit, but profit's only one-sided. That pertains to the person or the organization selling something. It also has to be affordable to the person who's buying it. So the economic has two pieces to it, so it's economically viable. But the point is here, if it's not economically viable, then it's not sustainable. And the same is true with regards to environmentally sound or socially responsible. That's why it's so easy to call foul and say something's not sustainable. The only way it is sustainable is if all three of those green lights are on. If we look at this, we can also look at a map to see where organizations are coming from. And this could be controversial when I put up some names up here, but I would put up some names. Enron, a company that's long since passed, you would say was focused on the economy to the detriment of everything else. Greenpeace speaks almost uniquely and solely to environment. PETA, animal welfare, falls under the social pillar. PETA, very extreme on the animal welfare side. I would say a regulatory agency like EPA falls in the environmentally sound and socially responsible space, paying little attention to the economically viable. If you look at some of the multi-stakeholder groups like the Global Roundtable for Sustainable Beef, are trying to bring these three pillars together. And I'm going to finish up with slides, and I don't see Cameron in the audience, but Cameron Brewitt, the immediate past president of Global Roundtable for Sustainable Beef, spoke 2 weeks ago at the annual Board of Directors meeting. I've stolen with his permission these last few slides with respect to sustainability and what we're trying to accomplish, because I think they apply to everybody and not just the beef industry. And again, you see these three pillars of socially responsible, environmentally sound, economically viable. It's where these three come together, which is where sustainability occurs. So the question is this, and I forget the term that Jeff used a few minutes ago, but is this the competitive niche that we're looking for? And we're just looking for brand differentiation to attract this kind of consumer? Or is sustainability really about a pre-competitive norm that we should all be talking about that applies to everybody? And I would actually say that it's the latter case. It's the pre-competitive norm. And sustainability should not be used as something as brand differentiation. If we look at a sustainable baseline, then we see this continuous improvement highlighted by this graph here. And the sustainable, and it could be any sustainable baseline. This one happens to be beef. This is where everybody should seek to be at a bare minimum. Everything in the case, regardless of manufactured product or a food product, should be at some sustainable baseline. And then differentiation should come over the top of that, based on other factors that have to do with your product that are differentiated, which do not include such things as food safety, do not include such things as environmental impact, and so on. Everything, it should be table stakes that when the consumer goes into the store, they understand what they're buying is made under sustainable practices. So we can do this with government regulation, which supposedly moves the bottom of the curve. We can do it with voluntary standards. The innovators will readily adopt these sustainability measures, whatever they are, but it's about moving the average to low producing or performing provider to move to the top. It's, again, about continuous improvement. And we can get compliance with regulatory efforts, but those regulatory efforts, the leaders are already past most of those regulatory efforts, and we need to get more of the bottom of the curve up there on a voluntary basis. So we can demand compliance, but that doesn't necessarily mean we're going to get sustainability. So a sustainable meat case, as I said, it should be, they should not be forced to choose between a sustainable product versus an unsustainable one. All choices should be sustainable, and that's basically the key message. So we've already heard about food waste. So the consumers actually have a role in sustainability as well. Food waste in the developed world primarily is table waste and processing waste, and the average consumer in the U.S. today, or the average family of four, throws away over half a ton of food. You know, I'm very much a believer in diminishing food waste. We are very much involved in that effort. However, if you look at the third world, most food waste comes, as it was already mentioned, from unharvested food and food prior to the farm gate. Death loss in animals, sick animals, animals that are not producing in any way, they're just consuming, crops that don't get harvested, and so on. That's another area of food waste that we in the first world need to help the third world with. Are we meeting the key challenges? A few points here. We can talk about metrics all we want. Warren Buffett found it extraordinary that academics studied such things. They studied what was measurable rather than what was meaningful. As a friend said to him, to a man with a hammer, everything looks like a nail. If measurement matters at all, it is because it must have some conceivable effect on decisions and behavior. If we can't identify the decision that should be affected by a proposed measurement and how it could change those decisions, then the measurement simply has no value. What does this all mean? A lot of organizations, well-meaning organizations, are out developing KPIs. In some commodities, there are as many as 140 KPIs that the producers in those commodities are expected to meet. First of all, probably not even possible. But even if those KPIs are met, there's another question that'll come up, and I'll show you in a minute. And lastly, we tend to overvalue those things we can measure and undervalue those things we cannot. And the key point here is that of the millions of farmers around the world, over half of them live in poverty. And if we don't raise up the living standard of those that are producing the food, we are not going to have sustainable agriculture. So one of the key measures has to be, are we raising the standard of living of those farm families? In other words, we can produce a sustainably certified product, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's got the job done that it was intended to do. And by some estimates, less than half the certified sustainable products around the world are not sold as sustainable products. And they're not doing the job of raising the standard of living of those that produce the food. So simplicity, and I haven't given you the final answer of how do we measure sustainability, but it has to be focused on performance and not prescriptive. In other words, it has to be outcome-based. We started out with prescriptions, that's regulations. We can get compliance to regulations, we can get compliance to KPIs. What we need to state is what the outcome needs to be, not how to get there. Leave that up to the people who know how to get there once you give them the goal. We need to promote innovation over compliance. Innovation could be technology, it could be a new way of doing things, could be a new idea. Don't close those down by being prescriptive. Prioritize the challenges and create the measure of impact. That's what many of these multi-stakeholder groups are trying to do. And finally, communicate, 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 tell the story, be transparent. So these are the characteristics of what a measure of sustainability has to be. I haven't given you a formula because I don't think there is a formula. I can go back to those 3 pillars and I could put a score on each one of those, say from 0 to 3. And if I tell you the sustainability index is 6, you have no idea whether that's 3 2s, which would mean pretty good, or whether that means 2 3s and a 0, which means it's not sustainable because one of those pillars is not met. So I don't have an easy formula. I would love to, but I don't. But these are the characteristics of what needs to be in a sustainable measure. Thank you.